Tobago updates. Good morning, Tobago. Wake up with Candace and Denicia.
Let's go. It's a brand new morning. Rise up to a brand new dawning. As the passion start to rise, the energy fill the skies. I say thanks for favor to wake up and
Good morning, and welcome to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. I am Shenell Felix, guys, and you know, whenever you see me here, it's because we're about to have those conversations that you want to have to get your morning started, and I'm about to ask those questions that you want asked. But we are in the middle of unprecedented times in the island of Tobago, whereby there's a war being waged on Tobago, and many might think that it's being waged from God knows where. But in the midst of Voice Note Gate, we see something happening in Tobago that we haven't seen ever before, especially in the political arena. There are several things that are at hand here. There are several things that come into play. One of those things that we can see happening is that for the first time ever, we see an audit report being done in the THA that exposes things that we have not uncovered for years. Things that have shown that the Tobago House of Assembly has been used by previous administration and others for things that only that audit report would reveal when it becomes public. We have a situation where audio tape where members of the executive were heard discussing things where they call their strategy that included things like propaganda and other things. And we had the chief secretary coming out and saying, well, this is a conversation that they did have. And then we have the TTPS coming out to talk about conspiracy to use state funds and defrauding the government to produce propaganda. Now, these and several conversations are happening on the island of Tobago, and it would be amiss of us here to not discuss what is exactly happening. And this morning, to have that conversation with me, I have Mr. Anslem Richards, who is one of the chief advisors in the Office of Finance. Good morning, Mr. Richards.
Good morning. They may call me the chief propagandist this morning.
Well, I don't
because I'm employed by this administration.
I don't know. Well, that's something that many persons share. But before we get into this discussion this morning, we want to make it clear that your opinions and the opinions shared during this Good Morning Tobago sessions are not the opinions of Tobago Updates, but the opinions of the individuals on the set at this point in time.
And definitely so, because we have to be going and have to sit up and take notice of what is happening in our space. And what is happening, as you rightfully said at the outset, it's unprecedented times. And if we don't take note of what is happening and react in a particular way and send a message, and I would say we need to push back, send a message to the authorities that this is not fair. You cannot weaponize and harass, political harassment, I will call this, the people of Tobago and their government. They have elected their government. You cannot use the resources and the institution of the state, or you should not do that to harass the people of Tobago and their island government. It is unfair, it is unethical, it is wrong, and we as Tobagonians must and should stand up and send a message to Port of Spain that we will not tolerate this. We have a crisis. We have a security crisis in this country. At this particular point in time, we have over 320 citizens who have been murdered in this country for the year. And we are at the 18th of June. So if you take that on average, we are heading for over 600 murders by the end of this year. We have a commissioner of police, Ms. Ola Christopher, who is literally running from the media to account for her stewardship as commissioner of police, running from the media to speak to the issue of murder directly, and supplying the media with a 16-minute voice recording to explain what is happening with murder in this country, which was published in the Sunday papers. But yet we have a ton load of police officers over here harassing and taking away phones and electronic devices of persons who are employed by the government of Tobago on the island of Tobago. And yet we have a crisis in this country.
No, there's several questions to be asked this morning, honestly. And it's so much confusion out there because there are two things that are at play. And the question was asked this morning during an interview with Julian, my colleague Skeet, he would have had a conversation with Mr. Clyde Weatherhead. And Mr. Weatherhead would have separated the matter into two things. And he said it's either their investigation a conspiracy to commit fraud, which that would have to do with the discussion that was had on the voice note by the chief secretary and others that were present, or it's either they are investigating whether or not this has actually taken place. And my question then is, if you are investigating whether or not that has taken place, he correctly mentioned going to someone's home as opposed to going to office. It's two separate things, because if it's work-related stuff, you would expect them to go to offices, which they have done. Now, the question therein lies, how do you separate what individuals are doing from an administrative perspective in the THA from what they have the right to exercise in their own private capacity as citizens, to exercise their right to participate in politics? That's my question. How is the TTPS separating the two matters?
But the troubling thing here is that the TTPS is using a list that was put out by the PNM to say that these are the persons that the assembly hired to activate this so-called propaganda machinery. Where that list come from? On which certain person's name were published. What role did the former chief administrator, Etlin John, played in all of this? And the time they say that she was employed, she was the PS at CAS. And they went to the woman home over the weekend and took her devices. We have to stand up and say, this is not fair. We had a situation in Tobago where there was Landgate in Moriah involving the Prime Minister. Have you heard the police went by him, took his devices and all of that? All that was in the public space where material was allegedly moved from the hospital construction site to a development in Mason Hall in which he had interest. Did we hear police embarrassing then he wasn't Prime Minister at the time? Did we hear police searching and seizing devices of his family and the contractor? We had a situation recently where a Minister of Government, Foster Cummings, was published, a whole series was published every night for about a week with alleged commingling of funds and all kinds of financial maneuvering and manipulation. Did you hear the police, did Christopher or the Commissioner of Police, did the Anti-Corruption Bureau didn't see things happening here? Did they go into Foster Cummings' home or his workplace and seize documents and devices? Why is it that they feel that Tobago is a soft target and Tobagonians are a soft target? And they can come here and terrorize the people? I came from the law enforcement. I came from police. And I could sit here this morning and say I was one of probably the best investigators in the police service during my time. Trained by the DA, trained by the Canadian Mountain Police, and all of that. Worked in some of the most elite units in the police service. But I'm saying this amounts to police harassment. This amounts to the weaponizing of the police service against political opponents. We have had a situation in this country where before the end of the financial year, last September 30th, the Auditor General was sent in. Never in the history. We had 23 years of PNM administration. And at the end of September last year, the Auditor General was sent in to audit the development program of this administration. When they are now auditing 2017 financial statement of the THA, they came in to do a special audit on this administration development program for last year, which for God, and God don't sleep and God don't like ugly. There is nothing negative that came out from that thing, more than it picks up some misbehavior of the last administration with some road paving in Adventist Street in Mason Hall, where they wanted to pay the contractor 60 million and all of that. Came up Rabbit Lane where no work was done and all those things. Because when you plan to do evil, the God that we serve does not sleep nor slumber. The God that looks over Tobago does not sleep or slumber.
Oh, what I want to understand is the legitimacy of the investigation, because of the fact that it is impossible to separate what these individuals do in their day-to-day tasks, their secretarial duties, their duties as personal advisors, their duties on boards, all the projects and proposals that they have submitted and continue to do. When they are showing these things, when you are investigating and you are seeing their meetings to minutes with with other government officials in Trinidad, let's say for instance when the ministry meets with the division here and many of the staff are present, how do you then say that these staff are not doing the THA business, but they are doing propaganda specifically? Because one of the things that was mentioned is that these individuals are being investigated because they were hired by the THA for the sole purpose
of spreading propaganda.
Well,
I want to see how they will prove you or anybody else's work sole propaganda. What will be the hard evidence for that? Because under the law, Section 25 provides for the government of Tobago, and I'm deliberately using that term because we need to emphasize that we have an island government that is elected by the people of Tobago. There are some politicians, one of whom I sat on this set with, who thinks that we don't have any government in Tobago. We have a THA, which is nonsense. We have an island government elected by the people to do their administration for a period of 4 years. And I'm saying that the law provides for that government to hire people to do the work, to deliver the goods and services to the people of Tobago. And that is provided under Section 25 of the Act. I am seeing a significant challenge for any law enforcement agency to prove that anyone was hired for the sole purpose of spreading propaganda.
So if you see it like that, do you then think that this is really just political intimidation? If these are things that is near almost impossible to prove, is it that the aim behind these things might just be to come to Tobago, embarrass Farley, and embarrass Tobagonians on a whole?
Well, I am leaning into that position until the police comes to a place where they can produce hard evidence. Because I want to know who made this report. I know they will say that nobody don't have to make the report. They hate in the space, and in the interest of public interest, they have to do it. But they heard things about Cummings in the space. Did they investigate Foster Cummings? They heard things about, well, I know there was an investigation with the land gate. You know, there are so many things you have heard in the space about other politicians. Did we had this kind of investigation? We sat here for 23 years, and we know, all of us in Tobago knows, that the last administration had a whole program called Community Liaison Officer. All of it do spread propaganda. The whole program put in place by Warville London. The Community Liaison Poster with Moyi and all of them.
All right, and we're gonna take a quick break here, and we'll be back really soon. And we're gonna continue with this conversation. Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago, guys. Again, as stated before, unprecedented times. Things that we have never seen happening in Tobago. It's already in the public space, and it's public information that currently the Anti-Corruption Bureau is in Tobago, along with the Financial Investigations Unit, and they are carrying out their investigations. And several Tobagonians, and I mean, I think tomorrow you guys may have to see me on the side of Mr. Richards, because there's so much to be said, but we have to always ensure that we maintain the integrity of Tobago updates. And I have a job here this morning to ask the questions. But there are many questions that I feel like I myself have to answer in the spirit of transparency and accountability. And as a young person in the Tobago space who would have gone abroad and studied and done enough, I believe, for youth development when it comes to speaking out on topics related to politics on the island of Tobago, and to be educated enough to be employed by the state and then to be deemed as a propaganda strategist because you have a voice in the public that may not be one that concedes to the popular opinion or one that is in alignment with those of the opposition. But I have a job and a duty to discuss topics that may or may not be in favor of certain political views. But this morning, we're talking about this investigation that's happening on this voice note. And as I said, maybe tomorrow I might be sitting in the seat of Mr. Richards as we have the conversation from another perspective. But as I sit here, one of the things that I want to inquire about, let's look at Mr. Gary Griffith. Recently, I had a conversation with him, and he would have thoroughly expounded upon the fact that the TTPS's resources were used to intercept the phone lines of him and his wife. Also, the same FIU was used to go into their personal bank accounts to begin to investigate them. And these are the type of things that we've been seeing being done by the state to individuals of interest. And what I want to ask you, Mr. Richards, is do you think it's a similar situation taking place in Tobago where the state's resources are being channeled towards political intimidation of an opposition that have clearly swept the PNM in Tobago?
Well, the evidence points clearly to that. You know, we have had, as I said before, we have had the Auditor General coming in at the close of the financial year last year, unprecedented. We don't know who sent her. It has never happened in the history. As the financial year, they wanted to do a special audit. Rightfully so, the Constitution provides for the Auditor General to come in without notice and do that kind of audit. But we are saying this is highly unusual, and we are thinking that was engineered from somewhere else outside of the Auditor General office, and instructions were passed on to the Auditor General for that to happen. We have seen over time how even with the amendment to the THR, how that was handled. There was no consultation when the seat was moved from 12 to 15. So we have seen those trends. And therefore, we have seen that the current PNM administration that formed the central government, how the leadership of that organization is inclined to use the resources of the state to advance the agenda of the entity. And therefore, any entity that seems or appears to be in opposition that is likely to face the nuclear options of the state. And therefore, we as to be going and have to call this out. We have to call the country to account. We have to call the central government to account.
Excellent. And let's delve a little bit into the voice note specifically. There were certain things that were discussed there where it comes to the spreading of propaganda on social media. And recently, I would have had an interview with Mr. Anslem, who is the leader of the PNM Council Tobago. And he said to me, admittedly, that these are strategies that they themselves employed. However, they do not use state funds to do it. So he admitting that they employ the very same strategies. The question therein lies, did they employ these strategies during their time in office? And now that they are no longer in office, they have to use resources from elsewhere to carry out those very same strategies. And when we look at the type of questions that were asked at the investigative level in the House over the last couple months consecutively, you can see where a number of contractual information for particular individuals who are now being named in this investigation is being put out in the public. So any smart individual could identify that this has been a calculated and concerted effort to target contract workers who have shown public support for this particular administration.
Well, we have had in this space, and I said it before, we have had the whole program called the Community Liaison Program, which was a program designed to advance the messages, propaganda of the administration then. We have had in the Division of Finance, we have had a program called Youth Energized for Success. I don't know if you passed through that program in your youthful days. That was a
I'm still in my youthful days.
well, I see that you are now engaging in a higher level of youthfulness. Yes. And congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But I'm saying that program, the YES program, was a political machinery of the PNM administration. Because all those persons were employed on contract and the youthful thing. And when you look, every social event that were held by the party, they were showing up to work. Even up to today, Minister Shamfa Kwadwo still writes to the division and asks for their support when she has a community outreach program, the YES program people. Because it is still embedded in her mind that is one of the levers, or that is one of the components of the information machinery that was set up within the government of Tobago to advance the then government, the island government agenda. Even today, she writes continuously to the division for us to, and we send them to help her in her constituency when she have her outreach and so forth. So when they're talking propaganda, they must know that they have left a paper trail. They have left a pile of evidence where they have used resources of the state. And all of us in Tobago knows that, all of us. And we're pretending that we upright and so on, and we don't know and we're blind. You understand? But all of us have known and seen and experienced what has happened. And we have never had the police coming in and doing this kind of upheaval. I understand that they went by the Deputy Chief Secretary yesterday afternoon, and she confirmed it with their search warrant. What that is intended to do. This is the Deputy Chief Secretary of the Tobago House Assembly. And you are coming in with 8 police to search your home because there is something that they have propaganda machinery and all kind of nonsense. And that is the level of embarrassment and they call domestic terrorism. The police service is apparently being used to carry out acts of political domestic terrorism. Anytime you oppose the central government, you are a target for harassment.
All right, and
so let's look at it. Let's look at it. Take me into custody.
I would not be surprised if I see you in handcuffs later on this evening, Mr. Richards.
But I understand the system, and they know if they interfere with me, what is likely to happen.
Mr. Richards, let's look at this from a futuristic perspective. And how can the impact of Tobago's autonomy truly shift the trajectory of what we're seeing happening on the island right now, especially in light of this investigation?
Well, right. So, and that's why if you go back to the budget statement, the whole what we call the reform of government in Tobago is critical to avert issues like this. It is critical. If we don't fix this constitutional arrangement that gives the island government the constitutional authority for the matters for which it is responsible for in Tobago, and where the central government is debarred from interfering or getting involved in these matters. For instance, look at what happened yesterday. They were celebrating the pipeline exercise at Lambo Junction, and the Minister of Public Utilities said that Tobago shouldn't build a water park. You could imagine that? He's saying that the people of Tobago should not develop the island until he says so. Gonzales, or Gonzales, or whatever his name is, coming to Tobago to tell Tobagonians, don't develop your island, don't build a water park until I say so. What manner of disrespect and out of place this is that?
And how many water parks are there in Trinidad at present?
Well, I think you should say that. And how many big swimming pools they have all over the place in Trinidad. But Tobagonian does not deserve a water park. He don't know if we pull in our water from the sea is in close proximity. We could send off a 16-inch main into the sea and pull it and have a desalination plant to desal the water to service the water plant. He don't know the design, but he stood up in Lambo Junction there yesterday and saying that Tobago should not build no water park yet because they're now trying to organize. So what's the inefficiency? Gonzalez' incompetence must put our development on hold. And we must go to Port of Spain. And these things has to be rectified constitutionally so that the people of Tobago can legitimately, constitutionally determine their future, determine their development and trajectory, and deal also with the issue of internal security. We must have a secretary in the Tobago Assembly that is responsible for legal and internal security matters.
Right.
That has some oversight over what law enforcement does on this island. Because if you have a situation where you are an island government and you have no control over the security forces on the island, well then what? Is an occupied state? Just check out, constructively, you are living in an occupied state because the armed forces control your movement, they control your security, but then you have they are being remotely controlled from Port of Spain. Then what is your oversight and accountability arrangement in a situation like that?
The question therein lies, do we have persons in office, in opposition, whose true intention, passion, and purpose is to see the advancement and the development of Tobago as opposed to self-aggrandizement and power for self? Because with everything that we're seeing on the island, there are so many areas of Tobago's development that continues to be neglected. And while we continue to ask for a certain amount of allocation in the budget, we continue to get what central government thinks that we deserve. But when would the attention by our officials be placed on truly advocating for Tobago, getting what Tobago deserves, apart from all the noise that is happening?
Now, you have to understand the political strategy here. Is to keep them underdeveloped, poor and stressed, on the border of misery. So when you have that, people take whatever you give them. But if the people and their institutions are developed, they become independent and powerful in their thoughts and their decisions. That does not help the PNM. If you look at the political configuration, the parliament is constructed now in terms of opposition and government. 22 to 19. There's a two seats difference. If the PNM does not win in the next general election, if the PNM does not capture the 2 Tobago seats, their chances of forming the next government is very, very difficult. And therefore, and we must see it for what it is. The political strategy is to beat the opposition that have whipped the PNM in 2021, 14-1, into submission. And everything that they are doing is that. We are not getting our releases on time.
So is this a distraction from the advocacy of this administration to advocate for the type of financial resources that Tobago needs within the next financial year?
Well, we are advocating for it, but there's a deliberate strategy from Port of Spain that speaks to disruption. It's to disrupt the functioning of the government so that the people will react in a particular way. It is a deliberate strategy. It is calculated. They have taken over a month to appoint a chief administrator. In the history of the island, that has never happened. Over a month. Talk about service commission and properly constituted and all manner of issues. Right? We have had this sending in the Auditor General. Our releases are not coming on time. They're not giving us all our releases at the end of the fiscal year. So you are seeing patterns that are pointing to a coordinated, deliberate, engineered strategy to cause disruption in the functioning of this administration in Tobago, including this police investigation is part of the equation.
Can we see, or can we project that there's a concerted effort to put the Chief Secretary in handcuffs so that they can have a nice front page photo that says that the Chief Secretary has been arrested in relation to this voice note case?
Well, I am not seeing them able to prove any case against the Chief Secretary.
But even without them being able to prove anything, can we expect us to be going and to see them carrying out the Chief Secretary in handcuffs?
No, this strategy, I can't see the end game being that. I think that this strategy is to wear down the people of Tobago, trying to prove or create a narrative that this administration is so corrupt and so forth, and that the people will look away from this administration. But I tell you this morning, Tobagonians are a people who are resilient. They have lived in this space. They understand genuine leadership. Yes, we will make mistakes, but they understand the leadership that they require, and that's why they have elected this administration. This will backfire on the PNM. You know? This will certainly backfire on the PNM because Tobagonians are watching quietly, and they will remember. They remember how arrogant they were when they had the 6-6. And how the government in Trinidad came in and changed the law and changed the boundaries to create a competitive advantage, because the split constituency that they thought that they had a stronghold and they would have won the election and they were celebrating. And at the end of the day, they were totally wiped out. 5 votes. And if we had done the recount properly, we would have no Kelvin Morris in the House of Assembly at this particular point in time.
The last time the PNM had a meeting here in Tobago where the Prime Minister was present, he said to Tobagonians that they are still in charge and they still run the government, and it's still the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Do you think statements of this nature would come back to bite the Prime Minister when it comes to the next general election?
Right. So this administration has to educate and communicate with Tobagonians, explaining to them the developments that are happening, the challenges that we are facing, and how we intend to solve those problems working with the people. We have to have that continuous conversation. The time and the episodes of events that are taking place require us to have a very deep relationship with the population, because at the end of the day, We administrate and lead for the people of Tobago and not for the assemblymen. And therefore, we have to build and set up the communication strategy where we can have constant engagement and communication with the people, keeping them up to date as to what is happening, what the central government is doing, what it is not doing, what it is providing, what it is not providing, how they are coming into the space, and the interference and the nonsense that Mr. Gonzalez Mr. Gonzalez spoke yesterday about Tobago shouldn't build a water park now, and he's trying to order and put time-bound measures for Tobago development, totally out of place and out of time. And I hope that the media who is giving him all the coverage in Tobago would have picked that up and said something, because they are purporting to be Tobagonians. And you have a minister coming to say that we shouldn't do this development. And not one of the so-called social media reporters asking why Tobago should not have a water park at this time, and whether Tobago should mortgage its development for your inefficiency as the Minister of Public Utility in 2023.
Well, we will continue with this conversation as soon as we come back right after this break, guys. See you soon.
Good morning, Tobago.
Good morning and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. Guys, we've been having a very interesting conversation about these unprecedented times that we're seeing in Tobago. But before we get back into that conversation, Papa B's in, guys. They are letting us know that they currently have couples packages that are available, and they have a $700 per night package for couples. They have $1,000 for family, and also $600 for single persons who are just looking for that escape. You know, sometimes we just need a change of environment for that mental health break that is often necessary. And Papa B's in, they're located in Scorpio Trace, Canby, and they provide a mini bar, pool, massage salon, air conditioned rooms, and Wi-Fi to go with it. So be sure to check out Papa B's in right there in Canby. You can't miss it. It's right as soon as you turn off on Scipio Trace in Canby. Guys, so we're going to get back into the discussion this morning. And one part of that discussion that is extremely important to understand is the role that this audit report is playing in the type of manpower that is being put into pursuing this audio gate situation in Tobago. Tell us about that, Mr. Richard.
Well, the audit report, the forensic audit report into the programs that we called last year, is pointing to some very interesting development. That's what's happening in this space in terms of, well, issues that can be classified as money laundering, among other things. Because we have had contractors who invoiced the THA for work that they never did, you know, and $5 million, among other things. We have invoices on average were inflated by 60%. So if the job cost $4, they were charging the THA 10. So they were getting $6 free. And they never thought that this administration would have come into office and did the kind of probing into these programs to unearth what was really happening. And this is making a lot of people in the politics and in the business community very uneasy and uncomfortable, right? We have had situation with one project in Adventist Trace where they build the THA for bitumen, and when you go, it's concrete road. They were overpaid already, and then they still have two invoices in asking for almost $8 more million. When you look at the road is a concrete road about the width of the stable. Going down to the back, about the width of the stable. You can't even turn on the road. And they wanted $15 million for that project.
So how is that the possible result of that audit report feeding into every other thing that we're seeing taking place on the island?
Well, the audit report, when that is made fully public and the investigations are completed and the culprits are brought to justice, it will really present to Tobagonian the historical antecedent of how their monies were being siphoned out of Tobago. And this could spell a really bad political history or a political ending for the PNM in Tobago. If we understand what was happening with our monies in Tobago, the Tobago House of Assembly was used as a slush fund over the last 20 plus years.
And allegedly, persons might want to assume that those money was being funneled back into
political campaigns.
Right.
If you look at the circle, you see the monies were going to contractors, and contractors were funding the PNM, and that was the circle.
And these are the allegations that are coming out based on the findings of the report.
Well, those are the evidence that we are seeing. So we are saying that contractors will significantly overpaid for projects, and these contractors have serious links to the political party that was in office. But we
have never seen these types of matter being pursued or prosecuted at the highest level of the law. Do you think that the findings of this audit would really go anywhere, especially with the current administration that we have at the central government and their control over the TTPS?
Well, this administration, the island government of Tobago at this particular time, is pursuing this thing from two angles. We are going to go after individual privately to recover the monies, and where there is criminal conduct, the DPP will be alerted, the evidence will be supplied, and the authorities that are responsible for criminal investigation and criminal prosecution, which is the attorney, Mr. Gasper, the Director of Public Prosecution, will take charge of that. And where there is evidence for us to go under individual under the civil law to reclaim and to recover the monies that were illegally taken from the people of Tobago, we are going to go that route. So there's going to be a full ban of approaches to this to the end of this investigation to ensure that all angles are covered and that the people of Tobago resources that were taken without due process, without work being done, are recovered and returned to the treasury of the island.
Okay, and would this administration be seeking manpower from outside to avoid these types of investigations from becoming compromised?
Well, I could say at this particular point in time that there are king's councils that are working with this administration, looking at the findings, building the cases and so forth, and then we will be so advised as to what are our options on these findings. So we are putting in the resources, we are putting in the work to ensure that at the end of the day, the end results of this forensic audit is what we call justice for the people of Tobago.
Excellent. And moving forward, how do you recommend the people of Tobago respond to what they're seeing happening currently?
Well, what I would say, the Tobagonians need to be told what is happening. They need to be presented with the facts. They need to alert themselves to what is happening in their spaces. They need to engage in conversation. They need to listen, and they need to make the calculation as to whether this is justifiable or whether this is just pure political victimization and harassment against the elected representative. Because tell me, you're going to search the home of the deputy. I'm not saying that the deputy political leader or the deputy chief secretary is above the law, right? But what is the crime he or she has committed that requires her home to be searched? Police vehicle pull up in Bell Garden, police going up, digging up Faith Israel Brebner's home. You know, come on. You understand? We had issues with PNM official Marlene McDonald, who was charged and all of that. Did we hear all this kind of police activity with searching homes and embarrassing her and all of that? We have the minister, I mentioned it before, a sitting minister in government, all kind of financial commingling and all kind of things. And based on ethics alone, has the government acted? You understand?
So we have that. But is it that we can expect to hear from the Chief Secretary very soon on the matters that are at play at this point in time?
Well, I think that the Chief Secretary is looking deeply at the situation. I think he will speak at the appropriate time. Remember, we had a situation recently when we had an influx of licensed officers in Tobago. And we've seen the pattern. They were here, so they're searching and they're checking for vehicle and all of that. And rightfully so. And a statement was made, and the Chief Secretary was lambasted for making that statement about harassing Tobagoans. So the Chief Secretary, as the head of government in Tobago, has to be a very, very calculated in his response to matters like these, because he will, and they are waiting for him to say something, to say he's interfering with law enforcement. So the Chief Secretary has to be very calculated. He has to seek very tight legal advice on matters like these as to what kind of statement he makes in the public space where this is concerned, this investigation, because it's an active police investigation. And should the Chief Secretary come and make an announcement or a statement on this, it will be interpreted as interfering and with law enforcement and all of that. But I think that the people of Tobago should take note, and they should find some creative way of expressing their dissatisfaction. Whether they want to blow their horn at 4 o'clock and 12 o'clock every 4 hours, all drivers blow your horn, through Scarborough, wherever you are, blow your horn, and let Tobago as a symbol that you are not happy with this level of interference and disruption in the functioning of government. Every 4 hours. So we're blowing it 8 o'clock in the morning, we're blowing it 12 o'clock, we're blowing it 4 o'clock, 3 times per day. 8 o'clock in the morning.
What you mean, a concerted effort to demonstrate that
we are not satisfied. So blow your horn 8 o'clock in the morning, blow it at 12, and blow it at 4 o'clock and especially in Scarborough, and when you are close to certain law enforcement installations.
Tobago does not have a culture of protest. However, if we see a situation where our Chief Secretary is accosted, what type of reaction are you predicting from Tobagoans?
Well, I will not. I will leave. I don't think the Chief Secretary will be accosted. I don't feel he will be arrested because he has not committed any crime. The Chief Secretary came and said this was a strategy meeting. There is no evidence that this was implemented. There is no evidence that the state funds is being used to pay propaganda machinery. And the Chief Secretary have made his part clear. He came to the public and he made his statement. The mischief that is taking place in this space will come to its natural conclusion. The people of Tobago will have their opportunity to deal with the mischief makers. At the end of the day, there's a political dimension to this, and there's a social dimension, and there's a legal dimension. And sometimes when you feel you can win on the legal dimension, you may pay a dear political price that is even more costly to you than the legal victory that you assume that you would have gained from this mischief that you are trying to make, and using the resources of the state to suppress and disrupt your opposition that is in government in Tobago. It is unfair. The people have spoken in December of 2021. They have elected their government. Give the government the time to breathe and grow and deliver to the people of Tobago. That's my position on this matter.
In speculation, can we assume or even speculate that there is an underlying motive that could possibly be there for this investigation, whereby they are looking for evidence of that audit report that is masked in the disguise of the voice note investigation? Is it possible that they could actually be looking for the findings of that audit report?
Well, the decision to target the former chief administrator who have just retired, and the season of her devices would probably be one of the lane they think they will have access to this report. Because if you listen to the Prime Minister's statement in the Parliament, and when he speaks to the whole issue of surrounding the suspension of Mr. Toppin and the appointment of a chief administrator, he spoke with a certain degree of passion about the chief administrator then issuing the letter to the head of the Service Commission the day when she was about to demit office that led to the suspension of Mr. Toppin. And the fact that the Chief Secretary would have said that he had sent a copy of the findings to the Chief Administrator, who would have looked at it and made a decision to lay charges against Mr. Toppin. So apparently there may be a line of continuum there that speaks to that the report may be available on one of the devices of the then Chief Administrator, and probably that is one way of making an attempt of retrieving or looking at that report. But at the end of the day, I think that the report will be sent to all the law enforcement community, because we want to see how they will react to the kinds of findings that are embedded in the report to see their independence, to see their commitment to law and order, to see how they will react to this kind of development, and whether they will go and search the homes of other persons who are named.
Excellent. And unfortunately, that is all the time that we have this morning, guys. I want to thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing this live. Thank you for commenting. And be sure to share it, continue to share it live, because we want a lot of people to be able to connect and catch up with what this discussion was. Go back, listen it from the top, and make your own assessment. But as I said earlier, there may really be the need for me to sit on the side of Mr. Richards tomorrow, because I too believe that there are questions that I should be answering. Guys, see you next time, and thank you for staying tuned to Tobago Updates and making us the #1 broadcaster on the island of Tobago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wake up with Candace and Denise.
Let's go, go. It's a brand new morning, rise up to a brand new dawning. As the passion start to rise, the energy fill the skies. I say thanks a favor to wake up and hear me neighbor. 60,000 people strong.